All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horine.
And today we're back with our final in-season podcast update from 2023. We figured we'd go ahead and cut off the bi-weekly ones at this one. We're approaching harvest, I'd say, in pretty much all of our regions that we're going to run around and get an update from today. But anyway, we'll go ahead and start throwing other off-season episodes in here once we get this one posted and move forward from there. So if anybody has good off-season topics they want us to talk about, feel free to send those in to us. So anyway, for those that may be listening in the future, we are recording this on September 8th. So anyway, just for future reference, if you're listening to this down the road, we'll start down in the boot heel today. So Jesse, what's going on down there?
Not much. Morning, guys.
Morning.
We just kind of harvested slow the past week or so. Just something I had to get some corn done, get it dried, or had all his contracts. But I think this week was the big week for everybody to get started. Had a little bit of rain Monday and Tuesday, so really guys didn't get started good till late Wednesday yesterday. It's been a little bit of corn and beans both coming out. Not really hearing much on yields, just that it's been one extreme or the other. They've been pleased or been disappointed with what they were doing. Rice harvest is in full swing for the most part in Boot Hill and Northeast Arkansas. And yields aren't as high as normal, but I think the averages are holding a little bit higher than what they thought they'd be this year. So that's very pleasing for as hot and dry and as much water as we pumped all summer. I know I talked to some guys earlier this week with a group from Central Missouri to come down and visit. I think we're going to start cotton foliation here in about a week or two. So we still got some time left on it. Double crops is about the only thing that we're really walking right now. But shoot, another week or two, they'll be done also. So really, it's just guys trying to wait as long as they can on their corn to make sure it's reasonably dry before they get started, and just going from there. I know we're kind of getting around and getting some ideas kicked around for next year already. I know that seems kind of early, but the past few couple of years, it's always a good idea to start thinking about this stuff as early as you can, especially while you're sitting in the combine, just staring out.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff, Jesse. Yeah, I know you guys are always pretty far ahead of everybody else, so sounds like it's certainly that way again. I'd say that variability in yield is going to be something that's not just down there. I think that's going to be pretty much everywhere. We definitely have some good crop in places and some not so good crop in places. So I hear that. Jesse, I appreciate you being on here this week. Appreciate you being on here every time. I think he had another commitment here coming up. So if he doesn't make it to the end of the podcast and has to drop off, thanks for all your time this year, sir.
No problem. I appreciate it anytime.
Yep. Thanks, Jesse. All right, let's swing over to Shannon. What's going on over there in Southwest Missouri, Southeast Kansas?
Yeah, so corn harvest we're kind of still on the early side of it. Harvest technically started a couple weeks ago, but it's been slow this year. There's been some pockets that the corn dried down and guys have been able to run, but there's still a lot of corn that's still pretty wet. Kind of typical when we have a drought year like we did, where plants prematurely die. They don't properly mature, so they don't properly dry down like they should. Moisture's staying high. It's staying 19-20%. We got a little shower last night. That might help it come on out, but we just got to keep being patient and make sure we're not putting wet corn in the bins, because that could lead to disaster down the road. As corn's coming out, we are switching gears already, thinking about next year, especially because in our area we do a lot of wheat behind corn stalks. So if fields need to get limed, we're trying to get in between, get them limed if we need a soil sample. So we do have a little busy window here for the next probably 2 to 3 weeks. Just some things to watch out for wheat. I know with some corn coming out early, it can be tempting to go out there and throw it out there now, but we want to make sure that we can at least wait till the end of the month. If we're grazing it, we're okay to go towards the middle, but we don't want to see that excessive growth going into the winter. We can have higher winter kill Also open ourselves up to more disease potential and also insects like aphids. When it's still warm, we haven't started hitting those colder temperatures yet. We see things in the wheat that we don't want to if we're trying to achieve those high yields next year. Soybeans, double crop beans have really went backwards the last couple weeks. 3 weeks ago, we were getting heavy rains, and I was really had positive thoughts on double crop soybeans, but it's been hot, 115 degrees for 2 weeks, and no rain since. There's a lot of beans turning, a lot of white beans, so things aren't looking so great there. I know up in Burlington, Opie area, they've been baling beans the last 2 weeks, which is pretty unfortunate. Something we haven't had seen in a few years. But that's kind of where we're at right now. First crop beans, they still look good. There's some pods dropping from the drought stress, but the beans made should be decent. They're not gonna be great, but we're at least gonna have a crop to harvest on our full season soybeans.
Yeah, good stuff, Shannon. One question, I guess, since Jesse mentioned it too, folks thinking about stuff for next year already. I mean, are you hearing anybody doing anything different as far as a crop rotation or switching up crops as far as next year? I know our value to grain is shifting a little bit in places, so I didn't know if that was changing anybody's mind on winter wheat planting or anything like that.
Yeah, so I expect our wheat acres to stay similar to what they were last year. A lot of it's going to depend on how guys manage their nitrogen this year, but if they are still managing like they normally do, we're going to have quite a bit of nitrogen left in the soil. And so we'll want to try to scavenge that. And the best way to do that and still have a cash crop is go with wheat. There has been talks, kind of early talks. I don't know if guys will actually go through with it or not, but we may see an uptick in grain sorghum acres next year. It's going to depend on, of course, it's going to depend on the weather. Grain sorghum can handle drought a little bit better. It's a little bit more heat tolerant than corn and lower inputs. So that may be a crop that guys look at. Of course, there's things that come with grain sorghum, like the sugarcane aphids, headworm issues, and then also handling issues. So I don't know how much guys are actually going to go through with the plans, but there are some early conversations happening that there may be a little bit of a switch.
Gotcha. No, I hadn't heard anything myself, really. Just kind of looking at markets and looking at input values and just kind of wondering what you're hearing. So appreciate it, Shannon.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, we'll slide on up to Scott Wilburn. Scott, what's going on in Central Missouri?
Hey, good morning, everybody. On the corn side, the majority of our corn is it's at black layer. A little bit of harvest has started out in the western part of the region. They're telling me, out there, most everything is at least below 25%. So we're starting to dry down a little more rapidly. We've also got some areas out there, and I mean, like everybody has mentioned, it's scattered all over. So I'm painting with broad strokes, and there's places that are gonna have pretty good crop, and then right beside, it's not going to be like that. So I don't want to, act like we don't know what's out there, but where the crop does look a little better and has just started to senesce normally, kind of like Shannon was saying, the issues he's seeing down there. We're starting to see dry down happen like it should, and combines start to roll. On the eastern side of the state, I've not seen any harvest yet, but I think we're going to be right behind them, here pretty quick. Excuse me. Cautioned on this here a couple of weeks ago. We are seeing quite a few stalk rots. Nothing dramatic as far as lodging, but the consultants are telling me they are talking to guys about, hey, you might want to look at this field before some of your other stuff. So right now we're standing for the most part, but we do have issues out there. We've got some just all kinds of different stalk rots. Fusarium's probably catching a lot of it, but there are some bacterial rots and some other things showing up. So we're one wind event away from maybe having some issues. So just be very mindful of what's going on. Moving to beans. Most of our beans are late R6. There are some R7 starting to show up. Started really changing fast this past week. We've got a lot of things that could be triggering that. And in some cases, we've got earlier maturities that they're just starting to change. But we've also had quite a bit of stress. We've had some cooler temperatures in the mornings, which a lot of times, we always talk about soybeans being nighttime, length of night driven, but every year as soon as it cools off, you see a quick change. So they do respond to that as well. And I don't know if we're seeing that. We didn't get tremendously cold, but to go from lows in the high 70s to all of a sudden 51 or whatever it was a couple days, that seems to move things along. Sudden death continues to progress, but seems to have slowed a little bit in this drier weather. There's also quite a bit of Cercospora out there, as we usually see. In some cases, as we're seeing beans that look like they've started to mature, it may actually just be Cercospora showing up. Kind of the tell there is if they start dropping leaves and leave the petiole behind. So on the trifoliate, basically the short stem that's gonna hold that middle leaf. If it drops just the leaf and leaves that petiole behind, that's kind of the tell that you're looking at a disease, and maybe Cercospora in particular. If it had looked like they were maturing, if they're maturing properly, they should drop the whole thing. So we've seen that a lot in the last. It's always been a thing, but we've seen it a lot in the last probably 7-8 years. I think just as some varieties have been a little more susceptible. Still have excellent yields in a lot of these fields, but it can kind of fool you as to what you're actually seeing happen, and it's something not besides just the senescence of the plant. Got a call yesterday, I guess kind of a watch out, of Dectus stem borer. So this has been on our radar, been on my radar for probably about 5 years. I don't know if Jesse, have y'all dealt with them down there longer than that, or?
Yeah, we've been dealing with them for a while, Scott.
Okay. I think I saw my first field probably about 5 years ago, and it was just a harvest issue. You're looking at beans, kind of thinking wondering when you're going to get in with the combine, and walking through the field, you're just noticing these plants start to fall over. And basically the borers went in and tunneled through it, and then tunneled out a little chamber at the bottom that just, there's just really nothing holding it up. That is my experience with it. Now, the phone call I received yesterday, it sounds like they're actually killing the plants. They're finding dead plants and then moving into the green plants around. They're finding the borers. I've not seen this field yet, but talking to Jesse, he said they have dealt with that when they get into them early. These were not, it wasn't necessarily early, but these were double crops. So it'd been a similar situation as to where they hit, in the life cycle of the plant. So watch for this. And this wasn't the case in this particular field, from the information I was able to glean over the phone and in pictures. But a lot of times, if you have a continuous bean situation, or you have any kind of a host plant, which would be basically anything sunflower family. So obviously sunflowers, but burrs and a lot of our other weeds, ragweeds, can host these. So just be mindful of this. If you're seeing patches out in the field, I've had a lot of pictures sent to me in the last week, 10 days of just patches that appear to be dying. In a lot of cases, I think it's just thinner soil showing up, as we're back into stress again. In some cases there were patterns that appeared to show up, and as we kind of investigated, there'd been dirt work done, and you're actually seeing maybe scraper patterns and things like that. But in some of these patches, you may actually be looking at the stem borers, and knowing about these is huge, because they can start falling over fast. I've seen them before where you could just, anywhere you wanted to, just lean over and scoop up, just an armful of plants that had fell down. So it can be very dramatic. The only, I feel like I'm kind of jumping around, maybe missing some things, but the only other thing I guess I was going to kind of bring up, kind of echoing what Shannon said, we're going to have, particularly in kind of, well, we've got a lot of areas where the corn's going to just be really, really tough, and in some cases it's already been chopped. So there's going to be an opportunity to get in early with some wheat. I'd just echo what Shannon said. I'd try to keep my powder dry for a little longer. I like to remind people that there's more days of summer in September than there are June. We've still got a lot of warm weather ahead of us. That can be insects. That can be, in some cases, it can just be a tough start for a small grass crop. Hash and fly is something we don't talk about very often, and very rarely really have issue with. But at least in my part of the world, that's because we're usually planting wheat behind beans, and we're struggling to get it done in October at all, let alone in September. So that is still a thing. Fly free date, I think the 5th or 6th of October, somewhere around that. I would be mindful of that still. If you are going to go out early for whatever reason, there are treatments that, everybody, when I ask people, what kind of treatment, I've got F&I, and that you've got to have a certain level of treatment to actually be effective against some of these insects. So bumping up to that next level on an early planting to give you some help with the flies, or as Shannon said, the aphids are huge in early fall. If we get lush growth, I mean, if I was an aphid, that's where I'd be. And next thing you know, come spring, we've got disease all over the place. So just be mindful of that as you're getting your wheat. We're gonna have some tough conditions, probably sowing wheat, some hard conditions in a lot of cases. Be mindful of that. The last couple of years, we've had a lot of issues with just stand establishment on getting a drill in the ground. I know, like, again, it's tough conditions, and a lot of times, just because of the nature of what's going on at harvest, you may have a more inexperienced operator actually sowing the wheat. Just really try to be proactive with those things, and establishment is just huge on getting a good start on the wheat. With that, I think that's all I had. I was going to mention and just kind of publicly thank Shannon and some of his growers down south. We were able to sneak off middle of the week and run down and take some of our folks from Central Region down to the Boot Hill, and we visited a cotton farm and a peanut farm and a rice farm, and we're able to talk to the growers down there, and something that on a practical sense we will probably never use, but from just seeing the diversity of Missouri's crops is extremely interesting. I've been doing this now for over 25 years with MFA, and have never been out in those fields and actually talked to growers and everything. So it was a cool thing for me, but I think for some of our newer consultants, it was pretty eye opening as to what Missouri has agriculture wise. And again, appreciate. I know he's got a lot going on like everybody, and appreciate Jesse's time and pulling his growers away from some early harvest and everything to talk to us. So that's all I got.
Excellent. Good stuff, Scott. Appreciate it very much. All right, let's swing on up to Kevin. What's going on up in North Missouri?
Oh, well, we're waiting for things to dry down. Corn's all black layered, all except for your possible any fields that were replanted or planted late for any reason. But the majority of everything's black layered. We're just still probably in the high 20% right now on the moisture. There's a field here and there that's a little drier. I have seen I saw two combines out this week, but no idea what yields are looking like. It looked like they were just kind of poking in the fields, getting started. Beans are starting to turn in places. Starting to get that mature color on the pods, starting to drop some leaves a little bit here and there. So we're kind of that time of year where we're just kind of keeping an eye out still for some stalk rot, standability issues in corn. Maybe making recommendations on field priorities to combine due to those types of issues. We're seeing in soybeans, we're still watching out for pod feeding insects. We've had some reports of some high stink bug numbers, few pod worms coming in. Nothing we've had to pull the trigger on, but we're mindful of. Scott had mentioned the Dectes stem borer. We have ran into a few of those clear up north as well. Something that I don't ever recall hearing about up in the retail north region. that's really about what's been going on. Just I think everybody's excited to get into the field and just waiting for the crops to dry down, and we're just still kind of keeping an eye on things to for any possible things that might happen. But I think we're getting pretty close to being in the clear.
Yeah, gotcha. I guess for you and Scott both, any rotational things, anything that jumps out at you from major issues this year that we ought to be thinking crop rotation wise, postseason management wise here before heading into next year?
I'd say the main thing up here with the trend of planting soybeans earlier, that's part of it, and also with spring conditions, we saw a lot more sudden death syndrome going on, even on fields that were treated with whether it be Saltro or Olivo. We still saw that disease. I think in a lot of cases, at least in parts of retail north, we do have a lot of beans on beans. I think that might be something that changes to kind of break that cycle. Anytime we can rotate to a non-host crop with any disease, that's gonna be helpful. But with what we saw with sudden death, I think we might see some corn get rotated in those areas a little more than what we have in the past. That would be the main thing rotation wise that I can see changing.
I guess what I'm hearing pretty consistent as I'm talking to my folks, and without asking them, they're bringing it up as the difference they're seeing in things that were treated with fungicide and not. Just really showing up, whether it's how heavy the tar spot has come in, to an area, or just, now as they're concerned about standability, and just really seeing a lot of difference in, still having some green in the stalk and in the upper part of the plant, and just that. I think as we're seeing some of these other, tar spot obviously is the big one, but a lot of us have been sold on fungicides, corn, is what I'm talking about, but just fungicides in general for quite a while. But as we see some of these issues coming up, I think we're probably just going to see more of a push in that direction. I'll be interested to see. I saw some crop health maps yesterday from an area that's actually been hit pretty hard with drought, and a grower that had not used fungicide did some split the field, and just was really dramatic. I'll be interested to see what that looks like. I mean, it may all still be below an insurance level, but it sure does look like there's going to be a difference. So trying to still kind of learn some stuff about that, but for the most part, I think the jury's in, and it's something that needs to be part of most operations. The other one that I failed to mention, and Shannon may be able to shed more light on this than me, just kind of going forward from this year's crop. In 2012, following the drought, we did see a lot of wheat typically follows beans, in central. But we did see a lot of wheat follow corn. Number one, we were able to get in there and do it earlier. Number two, there was a lot of nitrogen. It was a way to scavenge that. What did not happen was accounting for all that nitrogen, and we ended up with a lot of corn, or a lot of wheat, sorry, flat on the ground in the spring. So I guess my thinking there is be aware of that situation. My thought is still, I would still like to have that 25 pounds in the fall to get things going. But as far as getting really aggressive early in the spring behind one of those situations, I don't know that. I think I'd again probably want to keep my powder dry a little bit, and maybe we can do some testing to see what we have out there. But if we really load it up and then also have a lot of uptake from what was already there, we could end up with a situation. Shannon, you got anything on that?
Yeah, so I guess the last 3 years we've actually had drought situations in corn down here, and most of our wheat is behind corn stalks. Up in West Central, there's more behind beans up there, but south, I mean, that's the planned crop rotation. We're talking about crop rotation. just make it known that wheat behind corn is not technically a crop rotation because you are planting a grass crop behind a grass crop. But when we have a failed corn crop and we have potential high nitrogen levels, I like to pull samples right before we start planting if we can, get some nitrate samples pulled, and then it kind of changes how we manage in the fall. Typically, we're getting enough nitrogen from our DAP that we're typically not putting anything else out there. But when we start getting closer to that green up application, that's when we'll go out and pull again, depending on the winters that we have. That nitrogen may still be hanging around. If we have a wet winter, we may lose it. But what I like to do is go in and pull those deep dry nitrate samples again right before green up, and then kind of make the plan going from there. Like Scott mentioned, you easily can start seeing wheat lodge if you don't manage your nitrogen properly. So
how deep do y'all pull them?
Typically as deep as we can. I go a couple deep probes. I like to get to at least 18 inches if we can, just to see where the nitrogen is at in the soil profile. Kind of gives us an idea of what we're looking at. If it's deep, when we know we're going to need to put some on it green up to get those roots. We know the roots aren't deep enough yet. Just to get that idea.
I think Adam calls that an oscillation, not a.
Yeah, that's right.
Not a rotation.
They do actually run 3 crops down there, Scott, so I'm not going to be too hard on him. We're the lazy ones up here in North where we just have 2. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate all the off-season tips. Appreciate all the in-season tips this year. Thanks for all your time and putting these together. I know some folks have found them valuable, so hopefully we'll get a chance to do them again in the future. But appreciate all your all's time and appreciate everybody's time listening. So thanks, and we'll see you next episode.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.